Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here. As I was coming up the stairs, I was remembering this one guest speaker that we had a long time ago, and she wore these heels, these long things, and she was this very thin, svelte woman, and her whole team had come in and had this bouncing music, and the lights were just, it was just an incredible thing, and she's running down that aisle, and she barrels up here. She had everybody hyped up before she ever started. It was a wonderful, wonderful beginning. So I just sort of gently hopped up the stairs, but I'm just saying there's more than one way to do that. So consider yourselves hyped up as we take time to go within. I am knowing that hyped up, hyped down, ready, joyful, I am. All of these things, and I come into this moment with my breath, with my consciousness, with my feeling. And what I know is that everything that comes forth now and in the moments to come absolutely comes from the divine light and wisdom of God. And I know that it is received in exactly the way that is perfect for every consciousness expression that is in the room and in the world across YouTube and as far as it reaches. There is always understanding. There is always knowing. There is always love and peace to be received when that is the intended message. Intention is everything. And as I know that for myself, I know that for everyone. Today is a blessing. I take it as a blessing in gratitude. And I extend that blessing to all. And so in gratitude to simply be standing here, to be in this wonderful room that has meant so much to me and to so many, in joy and gratitude and love and peace, I simply release and know, and so it is. On the cusp of change. Talking about change was really a fairly easy topic to come up with because we're having so much of it. It seems to be everywhere. And sometimes, I think I mentioned this earlier today, occasionally I feel like a cork that's just sort of bobbing along in this wonderful ocean of life. And I'm just going this way sometimes and going that way. But change to me, when I first started thinking about it as a topic, my first thought was, well, there is the change that I initiate, and then there's the change that I receive. And so my first example was thinking about, well, you have to understand that I like to change lots of things. I move into a house, I want to change lots of things. But right now, I want to change my kitchen. I want to change my kitchen. My husband would be the person receiving the change in this example. And he goes, well, why do we need to change it? Because it's just fine the way it is. And so therein sort of captures a notion of how change is. And that was the first way I began to think about it. But then the more I thought about it, the more that I realized that when we receive change, it matters how we receive it. So there's really more than just two things. See, sometimes change happens somewhat gradually, and that is a certain instance, and maybe we are told about the idea. In fact, in businesses, that's what they try to do. They know they're going to change things. Two companies have merged, or they're changing their name, or they're bringing something else into the company. And so things are going to change. And so they start telling their employees how this is going to be, how it, they're starting to educate to help make the change a little bit smoother. But sometimes, and all of us experienced, change that just crashed in on us. One day things were one way, and the next way they were different. So change is thrust upon us. And eventually, everything changes, everybody changes in some way. Even if you didn't really intend to and you didn't even feel that affected, everything changed. It's kind of like World War II. Everyone in this country was changed by World War II, and we didn't fight it here. We just had people who went somewhere, and the lives, I wasn't alive then, but I've read enough about it, everything changed. And so at some point, they'll be writing history books and writing studies about the times that really we're still in, but are coming out of, about the change and how we deal with it. So I realize there's more changes than ways of thinking of change than just one thing. And then I remembered, perhaps you've heard that the Inuit people in Alaska are reported to have at least 25 to 50 words for ice and snow. There are different ways and nuances, but we still just have the one word for change. So maybe that's part of what we're learning. Maybe we'll come up with new words that help us understand about how we move into change. And so in thinking about this, I began thinking about the changes that are brought upon us and how we deal with it. And there are some people I know that have resisted a lot of the changes that happen. They may resist and I'm just not going to play, but others resist that there's a need for change. I've found so many different ways, and you understand that how we respond to change is something that it's part of how we are put together, how we respond in general, and it tells us a lot about ourselves. Now, all of the people out there and the way they did it is not what I'm interested in. I'm only talking about those of us who care about how we respond to change. Because what is definitely true about life and creation is that change is always happening. And we are told this, but I think it's easy to forget. I do think at this time of year, it's so much easier to see the beauty in change. Because every morning when I walk out about 6 o'clock in the morning, the birds are making such beautiful music. It really just sings to me to hear them twittering, and it makes me smile. And I also see the flowers that are budding, the bushes that are making beauty. So there's beauty and there's music with the change we're happening, and yet it's sort of like a way of saying, see, change does not have to be something rude. It doesn't have to be something that you fight against. You can simply go with the flow of change. I think that's what nature can tell us, because it is part of life. So when we get changes we don't like, or we think we don't like, we have choices. We have choices about, am I going to fight this? Am I going to pretend like it's not happening? Am I going to just simply resist what is? Or what is the best thing for me to do? Well, I know what I want to do. I know that I want to find a way to be comfortable with whatever the change is, if it's going to stay that way, especially. But if it's something that I can modify, I might consider that, or modify how it affects me. I can do all of those things, but I do all of it better when I don't resist. And that resistance is what rises within us, and it tends to blot out all of the creative thinking. It's an ego concept. The ego is what often rises as opposed to that soul within us that wants to speak. And so sometimes we have to allow that ego to simmer down so that that soul nature of ourselves rises. What is this? What is in this for me? What is happening? I have done a lot of preparation in my life to, how shall I say it, stay out of doctor's offices. I'll just put it that way. I don't like rude things coming into my life. So I started, in my early 30s, thinking about the food that I eat, thinking about how I exercise. And I made a lot of changes in those years. And those are changes that I did. I decided. And I'm kind of obsessive about my changes. So that, because I have learned that you can, when you are doing something that is sometimes not easy, it's best to keep doing it so that your body, your mental processes are expecting to do what that is. And that may be true with exercise, for example. See, every year, sometimes in January, people start to make ideas about how they can be better. They're called resolutions. But resolutions have gotten such bad press that we don't call them that anymore. We call them affirmations, or we call them different kinds of euphemistic names. In fact, the articles come out about how to keep those resolutions you don't want to keep. And gyms are ready for the new memberships, and they try to get you in there even if you're going to be there for a month. So it is just simply one of those things that tends to be built into our culture because we understand that some things are hard to change, even if we know it is for our own good. The doctor says this is a condition that you can easily eliminate if you do this and this and this. So you go, okay, I'll do this and this and this. But then, well, it won't matter if I just do this once. Oh, and well, what if and we start rationalizing. And I don't know what the time limit on those things are when you make these resolutions or you say yes to the doctor or you join the membership. I don't know what the time limit is. But I know from reading and I know from what doctors say in general, it's pretty common. Do you know that doctors in general expect that you're not going to read the directions on the bottles? That they give you medicine and it tells you how often to do it. They expect that you're not going to do it. So they try to set it up in such a way so that you either have to read it or they remind you or something else happens. I don't know what that's about, but that's our nature. We don't like to do things differently, and I don't take myself out of that realm. I remember once we had in another house we lived in, something happened to the door handle on our front door. It was broken, obviously, but not completely broken. So it got to the point that I'm always opening the door this way to go out, only it didn't work that way. You had to do it that way. So instead of turning it to the right, which was normal for me, I had to turn it to the left. It took me 2 weeks to remember when I went to the door to turn it to the left. I always would turn it to the right first and then turn it to the left. And that's not important. I don't object to turning the handle to the left. I have no resistance. And yet, somehow that muscle memory is built in, whatever you want to call it. But it reminds me how much more resistant might I be to some deeply held something that is perhaps hurting me in some way. I don't even know it's there. They call it, as one psychologist that I studied with said, they call it unconscious for a reason. It is something that we just don't know. But what we can tell is when change comes and we resist or we react in some way that's just not healthy. It's not useful to be angry, is it? It's not useful to get upset and yell and get bent out of shape. It doesn't usually accomplish much, but we do it anyway. And so when we do that, that needs to be, just like that light that turns on in the back for time. Something's up. Something's up with you, and it's not up with this other person. You may not like what's happening, but the reaction you're having is entirely different. The reaction is your choice. And we understand that, don't we? That when we react, it's our choice, even if it's just that quick a choice that we're making. And so do I make those choices? Yes, I do. I absolutely do. Not all the time, but I'm working on the ones I do have, and I'm wondering what it is within me that I need to look at. So then I also began thinking that those of us, if we're a spectrum of people, there are some people who absolutely love change. I kind of like it myself. So and then I know people who don't want anything to change. But Jack London said something like, I want to be like the superb meteor where every atom within me is glowing all the time. I'd rather be that than a permanent planet. I would love to embrace life, to get in and get action rather than let things just happen. Well, now this is a man who wants action. Jack London, he wrote Call of the Wild and all of those action kind of things. And so not everyone is like that. Not everyone wants to be a meteor. Some people are pretty happy to be a permanent planet. And so it's okay because it's what you want to do. There's nothing wrong with being a permanent planet. Jack London doesn't want it for himself. And so as we move forward in our way of understanding ourselves, to some degree, don't we want to take ourselves the way we are and then recognize how it is we would like to change that? I know that I personally have been seeking to be in a certain way for a very long time, even when I wasn't even consciously aware of it. In hindsight, I see things that happen that come together that help me see that. But I only see that because I spend time contemplating, by studying, by reading. And every day, I tell anyone that I talk to about prayer and about meditation and about contemplation, I must do it every day. I must. I must begin my day so that I am recognizing that power, so that I can manage those changes. Because what happens to us when life just gives you a cow plop, and it does sometimes, just a big cow plop. I read something the other day that another minister wrote, and I thought it was wonderful. She said, "Do you trust God when things are going well?" Yes. But when things start going badly, does that ego rise within you and you start trying to fix it on your own? Can we not just simply allow that faith? Can we simply know that whatever is going on, that God moves us through the most difficult things even when we don't know how? We just simply have to give up, I don't know, and I need to fix it myself, as opposed to allowing it to flow through. Can we find the way to know that God is in the midst of all of the mess, the choices, the bad decisions, the actions, the activities? Can we simply know that this is my experience? And God knows how to show me the way out. It doesn't mean that we won't do something, but it means that we're inspired to do something instead of reacting to do something. So on the cusp of change, to me, is where we always are. And when things are happening, it is always a matter of consciousness, my consciousness. No matter how unpleasant, no matter how difficult, my consciousness is involved in this, or I wouldn't be having this experience. I think Ernest Holmes said, no matter how difficult something is, if you're in it, then it's part of your consciousness. It's part of your experience. And so I have embodied that idea for myself, that when things happen, as I say, I may not like it, but there is a difference in not liking it and understanding that I have a part to play. If there's a resolution, then I want to be part of that affirmative resolution. And so what I'm inviting all of us is to consider, what is my part to play in any of the situations I find myself? How can I move into a situation and make it better? Everyone can. Everyone can, even if it's a kind word, even if it's a smile, even if you picked a weed out front that looks nice and you give it away. There is always something to do, always. But what it takes is that willingness to see outside of yourself with whatever's going on with you and know there is a much bigger world, and that God that is there in fair weather is absolutely firmly planted in whatever kind of weather. Whether it's the changes that seem to be buffeting our society for some, or whether things are going smoothly. And when they talk about the world in the marketplace, does it ever go smoothly? I don't think our times are any worse than other times, quite frankly. If you know enough history, you know that that's so. It's just that we're in whatever we're in, but we don't have to be in it. We can be in consciousness within our own selves, bringing that God consciousness within everyone. I love Emma Curtis Hopkins so much. And one of my favorite things is when she says, "Rise up, my soul, and heal the sick wherever I walk." And you understand that she is speaking to her practitioners that she's training. She's not talking about their asthma or their heart or whatever. She's speaking of consciousness, because everything begins in consciousness. And every time I say those words, I have the same vision. Of course, I don't know what Emma Curtis Hopkins looks like. I see her in this dark garb with this sort of a headpiece, 19th century, dark lace, and she's gliding through the room, and that's what I see. I heal the sick wherever I walk, and I believe it. I believe there is a lifting in the room, the consciousness in the room. But you see, every single one of us has that capacity. And so that is what I'm speaking to today. All of us can lift our own consciousness, and as we lift ours, everyone is lifted up, because we're always on the cusp of change. The next moment and the next moment. So as I anticipate the next moment, I want to know that the company of souls that are moving forward, rising up in soul, making people love God, show people how to be strong. And all things are lifted up. I am so grateful that I have the words. Show me the words. Give me the courage to be that person that lifts up and knows that it's good and very good. And so I can say, and so it is. Thank you all. So our wonderful volunteer is going to pass around the plate, and we're going to share in our community blessing for those things that we share in the plate today. Divine love consecrates my gift. It goes forth to heal, to bless, and to prosper all those who give and all those who receive. I rejoice in the sharing of my good, and I release my gift with love, and so it is. Thank you, Ruthie. I want anyone, does somebody have a question? Is that what you're raising your hand for? Or are you just raising it for the plate? That may be what you're doing. She's way over there, Ruthie, so she didn't want you to miss her, and that's what it is. Does anyone have a question? Sometimes we have questions online too, which I was excited the week we had one of those. That's kind of cool. No questions, comments. Okay. The microphone is coming to you. Oh, hi, Bill.
Okay, my question, can you talk about a time you managed a crisis or helped a client through a crisis with what you're talking about today?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. I'm going to go to a time that was a crisis of sorts. My younger daughter was, she was 11, I think, and she had major surgery. We were up at the Kaiser in Hollywood, and it was, when I say major, it was 8 hours. She had 2 different teams of surgeons, so this really was a big deal. And we were being prayed for during that time, and by this church, by different people in this church. And I want you to know, this was our healing ministry. Dr. Frank was still here at the time, and we were just, I was lifted up during that time. And that crisis, everything, unfolds. I mean, my daughter is fine now, so all of that's the bottom line. But then during that time, Bill, I was in the hospital with her. I spent the night there. I stayed the whole time with her, or my husband did. He came one night. She was in the hospital for 10 days. She was in PICU for 5 days. And so at one point, she had so many tubes coming out of her, going into her, and all kinds of things going on. And she had been through a lot with the surgery, so she didn't, she'd lost weight. And so I looked at her at one point, and it just sort of seized me. And my daughter, in this case, is the one who had the words. I mean, God responds in many, many ways. I was about to say something to her, and she said to me, "Oh, Mom, I already know all of that. Miss Marty," meaning Miss Marty Wing, who was her teacher next door at youth church at the time, "Miss Marty already told me all about that." And then she went on to explain whatever it was that needed to be explained. So I think what my answer is in crisis, I have simply, when it's my crisis, I have simply surrendered to that God that is there no matter whatever's going on. And I have allowed myself to be guided by that. And that is what has worked for me. When I've had clients in crisis, and I've had a couple in real crisis, and I went to the hospital with them because of that kind of crisis. And I know that God within me responds. That's my prayer. Let the words of my mouth, the meditation of my heart come from the divine light and wisdom of God, and I allow it to move forth. That is what has, but I don't try to take it on myself. I guess that's the bottom line. It's not my crisis, it is a crisis. It is something that's happened. Does that answer your question? Anyone else? That's a great question, thank you. Can't top that one, is that what you're saying? By the way, I didn't tell you this joke in the talk. You're ready for this? Okay. A wise Zen master was visiting New York City. So he went up to a hot dog stand and he said, "Give me one with everything on it." So the hot dog vendor gives him the hot dog, and the Zen master gives him a $20 bill. Well, the vendor puts it in the box and then slams it shut. And so the Zen master says, "My change?" He said, "Your change must come from within." so it is. No other questions then. Thank you all for being here.